Everybody, this is Dream, and we have a nice little 9-game slate for the main slate for Saturday that starts at 7 p.m. It's a pretty good slate, I think. I like a lot of the teams they're hitting, or pitching and hitting. There's actually 5 pitchers I like pretty good, and really the differentials are just based on who you like to face the best, and also like strikeout situations, stuff like that. But overall, there's a really good slate of games. I have 3 teams that are very stackable. The top 2 are Milwaukee and New York Mets, and then Seattle is the third one. And then also I have one game that's kind of stackable. It's Baltimore and Oakland, simply because they're going to be against bad pitching each way. And I feel like both those teams are going to have some guys that you could potentially push in for some value. With that said, let's get into the starting pitchers that I do like. And obviously the first guy is Max Scherzer. He has got a really great matchup against Washington. Now, he's had 2 games against Washington this season, and they were both 20-point games, which is a little disappointing for him, but they were pretty early in the season. I expect he's going to have a big game here. Not only that, but he's facing Patrick Corbin, who's just been absolutely garbage this season, and so there's a really solid chance he gets a win. There's also a really solid chance he's getting, 6, 7, or 8 strikeouts, and so even if he was to give up a run or 2, he's probably still going to pay off for you. Obviously, we do want him to get more than 20 points at his price point, but he's still pretty consistent and good as he is. The next guy that I like is Shohei Ohtani. Now, yes, Houston's a good team, and you don't always like going up against him. And yes, the Angels do struggle to score runs, and they probably will in this game. However, in 3 starts for Ohtani, he's had 33 strikeouts and given up 2 earned runs against Houston. And if that's really good stats. You got to ignore these fantasy points per game stats on the left or on the right because they don't differentiate the starts and the hit games where he gets hits on DraftKings. So it's not really accurate to say he's averaging 7.1 versus Houston. It's actually quite a bit more. It's like 30 something. So overall, it's he seems like a pretty safe option, especially with the strikeouts that he's done against Houston. And he also gets a nice little benefit of being at home, which he's slightly better at as well. And so I think he's a pretty solid option despite the matchup. The next guy that I really like is Robbie Ray for Seattle against Cleveland. Obviously, I don't love going up against Seattle all the time. Obviously, the right-handed hitters are going to have a little bit of an advantage here. But he does have some K upside, and 4 of the last 5 games, he's been over 28 fantasy points overall. And so he's been really pitching well. And hopefully he can continue that tomorrow. In his one game against Cleveland, he had 32 fantasy points as well. The next guy I like is Dylan Case for Chicago White Sox against Minnesota. Now, in 8 of the last 10 games he's pitched, he's added over 20 fantasy points, and he does have a strikeout upside in this matchup, and we definitely love that. Not only that, but in his one matchup against Minnesota this year, he's had 34 fantasy points. He is at home as well, which is going to be a benefit to him, and we should look for a pretty solid game from him. And then the last guy that I like is Julio Urias for the LA Dodgers. Now, he's probably got the toughest matchup against San Diego, and he doesn't have the strikeout upside of the other guys, but 9 of the last 10 games has been over 20 fantasy points, and he actually had a 20 fantasy point game against San Diego. So I think he's a pretty solid option. He definitely doesn't have the strikeout ratios that some of the other guys have, but I think if you need to save a little extra money, you could definitely save it with him. Unfortunately, there's really not a whole lot that is cheaper than that that's, in a good position. You could argue Luis Garcia for Houston against the Angels is okay. Obviously, guys like Trout and stuff could potentially smash him, though. But overall, it's kind of a weak list of pitchers below Julio Urias price point. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into the batters that I like. So to get into the batters, I'm going to start off with a Hail Mary option, which is Shea Lingerlays for Oakland. Now this matchup is interesting, and he's pretty inexpensive. He's very boomer bust, as you can tell. He gets strikeouts a bunch, and occasionally he'll have a home run or a triple or something. It's either like you're going to get like 2 or 3 points with him, or you're going to get 20 something. So obviously they're kind of few and far between, but when he does hit, he really does a good job. So he's a Hail Mary option, super cheap at $3,300. and so he gives you an option at that price range. Um, my next option is quite expensive, and that is Adley Rutschman from Baltimore against Oakland. Now, he hasn't been playing as well as he started off the season, but this is the type of game where he can really get going. And he's been having 8, 9, 7 point games, so it's not like he's just zeroing out all the time like Shea Langerlace is. Obviously, he's pretty expensive, so he's not the top tier option, but he's still a pretty good option. My next guy is Sean Murphy. I wouldn't say that he's the best option either, necessarily based on his price, but he has some pretty good upside, and in games where he's gone up against weak pitching, he's done pretty well. Then the next option is going to be, well, take your pick of whichever pitcher or catcher, sorry, plays for Atlanta against Cabrera today. Now, Cabrera is a kind of decent pitcher, but he's been kind of hit and miss as of late, and Atlanta's just been shelling people. So if whichever guy starts, probably going to be Travis d'Arnaud, but I don't know. Contreras has had some, just gotten kind of hit around on the as the catcher, so I don't know if he's going to play tomorrow or not still. But either way, I like both of those guys as a possibility, depending on if they play. And then finally, it's Will Smith. Obviously, he's going up against Sean Manaea, who's not been very good lately, and he's kind of due for a big game. And he's had a couple of big ones, but he has had some rough games as well. I would probably prioritize the Atlanta hitters or Sean Murphy over him, but he's an option just simply because of the matchup. And so that's pretty much what I have at that position. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of super good options that are cheaper. It's hard sometimes at catcher to get some good value, but maybe we get lucky with, like, if Omar Narvaez decides to ends up playing or something like that. But as far as I can tell, it doesn't look like he's going to play tomorrow. But with that said, let's go and get the first baseman. So first base is definitely the most promising position, simply because it seems like it has a lot of good options to choose from. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into that. So my first one is Hail Mary, and it's the guy that's trying to chase 700. He does have a positive situation with the pitcher, and so I think that, if you want to give him a shot to get you a home run, and with the way that we're chasing, he also has a tendency to get a couple walks here and there. And so, he's kind of a boomer bust, but, from a Hail Mary perspective, being $2,500, it can pay off for you if you can manage to hit it. Milwaukee, like I said, is a team that I really like. And Kirsten Hyera is somebody that I definitely think is valuable. He's had 2 home runs in the last 10, hitting 250 with 7 fantasy points a game. If he can continue that, if he does start, which I think he will, hopefully, he is a very solid option. Talese, if he doesn't start, will be the other guy. Now, he's very boomer bust, but when he booms, it's nice. But he's been kind of slacking lately, so I do hope that Hyera does pitch tonight or play today. Sorry, so that because he's the better of the two as of late. Then I have Ryan Mountcastle for Baltimore. One thing that's beneficial about Baltimore is a lot of their guys are pretty inexpensive, and they've been playing pretty well lately. They're trying to make the playoffs, so can't believe that, can you? And a lot of their guys are really cheap, so that's nice value options. And then we have Ty France for Seattle. He's actually hit 3 home runs in the last 10 games. He's been hitting the ball really well. As you can see, even, he had a couple of bad games when he wasn't really starting as much. But right now he's playing and he's hitting the ball really well, so I really like him in a plus matchup. Then we have 2 guys from the Chicago White Sox, which is Andrew Vaughn and also Jose Abreu. Both of them have been hitting the ball really well lately for the White Sox, and they have a positive matchup today against Small, and so I look for both of them to be good. And then the final guy is Pete Alonso, again against Patrick Corbin. He has absolutely destroyed Washington this season. In 14 games, he's averaged 11 fantasy points a game with 6 home runs. This seems like the game where he should be able to get a home run. He's been a little bit wonky lately. 6.6 fantasy points a game with 2 home runs the last 10. I feel like this is the type of game that he has an opportunity to really break out. So, obviously he's pretty expensive, so you do have to be wary of that. but I still think he's a good value. So then we get into second baseman. So I've got Luis Arias for Milwaukee. Now, obviously, he has cross potential at second and third base. And second, third, and shortstop have been kind of difficult positions the last couple of days, and this is going to continue today. There's just not a ton of like high quality players to choose from in this position based on matchups and stuff. Like, seems like the best guys are going up against the toughest pitchers, and so it's kind of been hit or miss the last few days. However, we've still been able to find good value and stuff in these positions. So Urias is a guy that he looks pretty good in the matchups perspective, and while you can see that in the last two games he pinch hit, and then a couple of games before that he did as well. And so it's just a matter of him being a starter for the most part in that position. The next guy I like here is Chris Taylor for the Dodgers. He's really been playing well when it comes to just getting hits. It's not that he's scoring a crap ton of points necessarily, but he's been getting like 7 points, 10 points, 8 points. And I tend to like that about a guy when you need to find some value at the position for second base. And so he seems like a pretty decent option. Then we look at Tommy Edman. Obviously, he's more expensive at $5,000. He also has cross potential as shortstop. Obviously, he's 5,000, but he is absolutely crushing the ball. 341 with 4 home runs in the last 10, with 13 fantasy points a game. He hadn't even had a bad game. He's had one bad game, and it's just crazy. Look at these stats, man. And then before that was when he was just pinch hitting a couple times. So he's just been really good lately, and I think he's a really high quality option. Obviously, you're gonna have to pay for him, but he's definitely somebody you want to try to sneak in the lineup if you can. Then I have Tony Kemp for Oakland. He's in a plus matchup. He's been hitting the ball pretty well, 256, which is above his average. And he's been good against Baltimore as well. In the 4 games they played, he's averaging 8 a game. He's not a big home run hitter, but he's good. He's kind of like Chris Taylor. He's able to score you 7 to 10 points in good matchups, and so that's what we like to see. And then finally, Adam Frazier for Seattle against Cleveland. He looks pretty solid for the matchup. Mostly because he's kind of in the same boat as well. 7 to 10 points, I think, in a good matchup is a possibility. So he also took a game off a couple of days ago after going through a little bit of a slump, and you can see that the last few games he's been doing better. So hopefully he can continue his upturn. It was just really hard to find a lot of good options at second base. If I had to, put them in order, I would say Edman, Urias, Tony Kemp, Chris Taylor, then Adam Frazier. But I think those are probably the best guys that we can find at the position. I forgot, I do have one Hail Mary option, which is Von Grisham, who is pretty soon isn't going to be a Hail Mary option anymore. In 5 games against Miami, he's averaging 11.6 points per game. He just hit a home run yesterday, and he's been having some off games recently because I think he's getting more used to the majors, and they're starting to figure him out a little bit. But he still has a lot of upside, and he's very inexpensive, so he's a good option as well. Then if we go to on third base, I've got, 5 guys basically that I like here. One of them is Luis Urias that was at second base I already talked about. Ramon Urias is another guy I like quite a bit here for Baltimore. He's got some upside today. His batting average hasn't been the greatest, but he's hitting some home runs and stuff. And you can see he's still going to score like 5 or 6 points probably, even if he doesn't do great. Obviously, we need him to score 6 points in order to be useful. But he's been in good shape, and Baltimore has really been maneuvering well. Another guy I really like here is Justin Turner. He's actually the top guy, I think, for this matchup. He's averaging 10 points per game the last 10. He's kind of due for a home run. He's not as big of a home run hitter as he used to be, but he's absolutely been torching San Diego this season, so I think he's a pretty solid option. And then Austin Riley, I had to include him because of what he's been doing to the ball lately. Again, 3 home runs the last 10 fantasy points a game. He had 16 fantasy points yesterday. He's actually had 3 straight games with a home run. That's pretty impressive, so he's trying to push past into the mid to late 30s now in the home run potential. So then finally we have Joe Wendell who's going up against Atlanta for Miami, and he's been hitting the ball decently well this season. He's not really a home run threat, but he's kind of in a similar position as some of those other guys where he's just having good games where he's, 6, 7, 10, 10, 10, 16 type of games. And so he's kind of a Hail Mary option, but he's still available as a pretty cheap option at $4,200 for Miami. Obviously not the best solution, but if you need to, if you have that kind of money left over, then he might be somebody you want to take a look at. And that's pretty much what I have at third base. There's actually some pretty good options there. I think Urias and Turner and Riley the best if you can afford them. So then for the shortstop position, my top pick is going to be Gunnar Henderson. He has had 3 games in the majors, and all 3 of them have been really solid. He's still only $2,800. I almost feel like he's a must play based on the price. Not to mention he's going up against a weak pitcher, so that's nice. Then of course I already talked about Adam Frazier before, and Joe Wendell, and Tommy Edman for that matter. So then the other 2 options are Francisco Lindor against the Corbin for Washington. He looks really good today. He hasn't been perfect lately, but it's a hitting perspective, but he's kind of due for a home run and stuff, and Corbin's a great situation to do that. And then Willie Adames for Milwaukee. Sorry for butchering your name. I seem to do that every time. He's been batting really well at 318 for the last 10 with 2 home runs. So if you can afford to pay up at this position, he's going to be somebody you want to. Into the outfield. So we have Tony Kemp, who I talked about. And then Gavin Sheets has actually been playing pretty well lately. He's averaging 10 points per game for the White Sox, 387, which is crazy for him. 3 home runs in the last 10 games. He's got 12 on the season. And as you can see, he's been hitting the ball pretty well. So you're not going to feel too bad, even if you get 6 or 7 points, because he's sub $3,000. The next guy I really like, and this is probably my favorite play outfield, is Mark Canha against Patrick Corbin. This guy's been batting .324 last 10, averaging 10, and has 3 home runs in those games. And he's been batting really well lately, and so I think he's a pretty solid option at this position. I also mentioned Chris Taylor already, and Andrew Vaughn. Another guy I really like today is Hunter Renfroe from Milwaukee. 395 last 10, 9.4 fantasy points a game, and he's kind of due for another home run. He hasn't been as good against Arizona this season, but he's going to have a better option in this matchup against Bumgarner, so I definitely like him. Then some more expensive options are Cedric Mullins for Baltimore. He looks really solid, and he's been 7.8 the last 10. Obviously, he's pretty expensive. And then Ronald Acuna. He's kind of due. He's had a couple off games, but he had 8 points yesterday. But you can see that he's been pretty consistent at getting points. It's just a matter like he's having some knee issues, so when he doesn't play, or if after he's played like 5 games in a row, then he starts to need a break. And so he probably can play another couple games before he needs another break. And he's killed at Miami this season. Hadn't really hit the home runs, but he's kind of in the potential 351 against Miami this season. I really like that. So I think he's a solid option. He's kind of due for a home run as well. And then finally, I've got 4 more guys. Obviously, Mike Trout. He's going up against probably Houston's one of their decent pitchers, but not the best one. And he's been really ramping up lately as he came back from his injuries. He's been doing pretty good as of late. He's got 10 fantasy points a game last 10, including 4 home runs. Hopefully he can continue that. And then Anthony Santander for Baltimore is another guy I like. Obviously, he's a home run threat. He's had 3 home runs in the last 10, but he's really kind of boomer and bust, so you do have to be careful with him. But it is a good matchup situation for them. And then I have 2 guys for the New York Mets, not last but not least. Brandon Nimmo against Corbin. He's averaging 8.4 last 10 with a home run. I think he's a really solid option. And then also Starling Marte, who might be one of the hotter hitters in the league right now, and he's going up against a terrible pitcher. So he's been having really consistent games. He's had a couple duds in the middle, but you can see the 10-plus numbers he's having quite a bit. So anyway, that's what I have for the position of outfield. overall, I think this slate is going to be pretty solid. I think there's some good players that you can mix in there in order to get the pitching right, and I think you can score quite a few points. Just finding the right batters that hit the home runs and get the hits and stuff today. So, with that said, thanks for liking, commenting, and subscribing. And if you have any questions or comments or any player that you'd like some more information on, feel free to leave it below. And have a nice day, guys.